Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to CPA Academy. My name is Lady Maya, and I'm happy to welcome you into today's webinar on Diversity and Inclusion One-on-One. I don't see color. Our presenter today is Jina Etienne, and before we get started, I wanted to go through some housekeeping items and do some technical checks to make sure everything is working. First, if y'all don't mind going over to the GoToWebinar questions panel, which is located on the right-hand side of your screen. Please let me know that you can hear me and see the slides on your screen, and feel free to let me know where you're listening in from. If anyone is having any technical trouble, please let me know in the questions panel. Please keep in mind that there are quite a few of you, and I'll do my best to get around to each of you as quickly as I can. All right, my favorite part. All right, North Carolina, El Paso, Ohio, Miami. I hope everything's going okay for you. California, Chicago, Lower Merion, right down the street from me. All right, Virginia. Now that I know everything is working, let's go through some housekeeping for credit. This is a 60-minute webinar and qualifies for 1 CPE credit. The way you earn that credit is fairly straightforward. Just stay logged in for 50 minutes of our allotted time and answer the poll questions. We'll have a total number of 4 polls during today's webinar. To earn full credit, you'll need to answer at least 3 of those polls. CPE will be issued by the end of the day today and will be available in your CPA Academy account. I also want to let you know that we are recording today's webinar, and the archive will be made available to you by the end of the day as well. We also recommend that you take the time to download today's presentation materials, which can be found in the GoToWebinar side panel. Now that we're all set, let's turn today's webinar over to our presenter. Jina, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, lady. Your energy, it's infectious. Oh, by the way, I noticed a couple people had some audio issues, so I wasn't sure. I'm guessing you will follow up with them.
Yes, I will.
So everyone, welcome to another edition of D&I One-on-One. Today, I'm talking with Barrett Young about the topic, I don't see color. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So Barrett, I met Barrett last summer, and we were a part of a group of CPAs here in Maryland that formed like a little, I don't even know what we were, a little talking group. And we met regularly to talk about D&I. We wanted to have more substantive conversations. And I learned a lot of fascinating things like, Barrett, you're a CPA, you are a partner in a small CPA firm, but before you became a CPA, you were a Marine. And so you went into the Marine Corps. Thank you for your service. And after leaving the Marine Corps, joined our fabulous profession. And there's a lot more to that story. Actually, it relates to the conversation today, so I'll leave it at that. But welcome. Thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me, John. This is something I've been looking forward to for a couple months now. Just had to get tax season out of the way. So.
And wasn't that a fun tax season? Tax season in my memory from when I was in practice starts December 26th and ends December 23rd. Is that how
Unless
it works?
it goes over 2 years like this one has. So.
But so listen, folks, we're going to be talking about this phrase, I don't see color. Barrett and I have talked about it a lot. We had conversations in the group, and I just love your perspective on this. So I just threw some pointers here. We're not necessarily going to hit on all of these bullets, but what does it mean? What is the impact? I think, Barrett, you have a suggestion on there might be some other ways to see this phrase. When people use it, maybe they're expressing their intention, and then, so once you're there and the conversation is started, how do we move forward? And so before we do anything else, lady, maybe we can launch that very first polling question.
All right, and that first polling question should be on your screen now. It says, have you ever said or heard the statement, I don't see a color? Yes, no, prefer not to answer.
I wanted to ask this question to kick things off because I was curious about the familiarity with the statement. I'm kind of expecting 100% yes, but you never know, which is why it's important to ask.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this poll down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now go ahead and share those results with everyone. Yes, 76%. No, 19%. Prefer not to answer, 5%. Back to you.
So thank you. See, never make assumptions. 76% said yes, 19% said no. And so I want to share with some folks, there are so many articles out there. I pulled up two, and I thought that they might be interesting for our conversation. This one is in Forbes magazine. Stated in 2019, so this goes back a ways, but what I thought was interesting is that it's the CEO of Starbucks. So throughout the professional business industry, we're hearing this phrase, bottom sentence there that says, the idea of not seeing skin color is nice in theory, but in actuality, it's inaccurate. And then there's this other article that I found, and this woman talks about what it feels like to hear this phrase. And she says, the second part, I don't see color has become a response of individuals to try and explain that they aren't prejudiced or racist. And although the sentiment is nice, this is a tone-deaf response and is causing more harm than good. So I wanted to set up our conversation today, Barrett, and now toss it back to you to kick things off, because I know that there might be some other points that you want to start us with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I was interested in having this conversation on here with you, Jina, just because this is something that I have said in the past. And I think part of my intent behind saying that is to say, I don't judge you based on your color. And we're going to talk about Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, because I think that's where a lot of people think that they're aligning with that when they say that. But as I went on and as I had this conversation, just what shifted in my mind to make me realize this is not where I want a conversation to go by saying this to somebody, whether they're white or whether they're black or any other color. I want to continue a conversation, and I found that this tends to be a conversation shut down. And so that's kind of why I've shifted away from that. So I wanted to start with, when we talked about this, I wanted to start with my history in the Marine Corps.
Sure.
And kind of aligning this with a saying that we have in there. So I grew up Northern California, between Tahoe and Sacramento, largely white population, not many African American, but the minorities that we had in Northern California might be more Asian background or Hispanic. I went into the Marine Corps and I trained in San Diego. All West Coast Marines go to San Diego. All East Coast Marines go to Parris Island, South Carolina. So we had people from everywhere, basically west of Illinois, heading to San Diego, and had a black drill instructor, had a Mexican drill instructor, had two white drill instructors. My last name was Y, so I was at the end of the alphabet, and I bunked next to two Asian Americans because they had last names that started with W, so I was towards the end of the alphabet where that was. But we actually had recruits from all over the country coming together in one place to be turned into one thing, and that was Marines. We had a recruit in our platoon, I remember, that had never seen a black person before in his entire life in person, and now he had a black drill instructor.
I had that
so
experience in college, just so you know, when I went to a predominantly white college, and it never even dawned on me that there was a person in the United States that hadn't seen a black person. Mm-hmm. It's interesting that somebody
that was shocking
in Marine Corps.
But yeah. So we had a saying, and this I kind of see as a corollary, but a little bit different in the Marine Corps. And we talked about this. I wanted to bring it up. We have a saying that we all bleed green. And that's the intent behind this saying is, when push comes to shove, you're my brother, you're my sister, we're Marines. I'm going to die for you. I'm going to lay down my life for you. And I don't care where you come from. That doesn't change the fact that I've got your back. I know you've got my back, and we're going to accomplish this mission together. I think that is the military corollary to, I hope, the intent of somebody who's positive, trying to say, I don't see color. The difference is in the Marine Corps, we do have a huge background. So we had white Marines, we had Southern Black Marines, we had Northern Black Marines, Midwest Black Marines, West Coast Black Marines. Like I said, we had Guatemalans and Puerto Ricans and Haitians and all of these different cultures. But when we came together, we were one Marine. We all bled green.
Well, so I understand the concept of that, and I think it's actually a beautiful sentiment. And when it comes to our military, I would hope so. In that we're all in this together. I got your back. I'll die for you. That is the utmost commitment and camaraderie and connection. When I hear the conversation, though, and when I've heard that term used in conversations with me, it's with a person that we may not have that level of commitment and connection to each other. We aren't in a shared mission. So I think it's the same in concept, but I think it ends up being very different. I do believe the intentions are good when people say it for the most part. But sometimes I worry that people use the phrase as a deflection. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And once I got out, or even while I was in, but I started to see how this can be used also as the shutdown. Like I said, it can also shut down conversations. I don't care if you came from the Bronx, you went through Paris Island, you're a Marine, that's all that matters.
Right.
Well, that wasn't reality for us either. We go home to different places when we went on vacation. We had a different experience of America. We all joined the Marine Corps for different reasons. I mean, that was shocking to me. I thought everybody had this like patriotic reaction to 9/11 kind of thing, assuming everybody had the same background and culture that I did. Really opened my eyes to see, yes, we all went through this shared experience for 3 months and it shaped us into what we were now. But we have different contexts and different backgrounds.
Right.
And I think that that's what this I don't see color misses. It says, I don't care about that. It can convey, I don't care about your past, Jina. All I care about is that we're CPAs and that's good enough for me. And then for one thing, it's not true. But for another thing, what does that say about you and your history?
Right.
I mean, if I take this to, it would be very crushing to me if somebody looked at me and being a Marine is just one aspect of it. But if somebody looked at me and said, oh, I don't really care about your service because I don't see military service. I don't see what you did before you came in as a CPA. I liken this, I'm sure this has never happened to you, but I liken this to when you get friend zoned by a girl that you like in high school.
When you get what?
Friend zoned.
I don't even know that term.
So friend zoned is where you like a girl in high school and she confides everything in you, but she dates all the other boys and talks to you about how bad they are.
Got it.
And I'm sitting right here, but you're stuck in the friend zone. You're never going to be in the boyfriend zone.
Ah.
And the crushing phrase that you hear from that is, oh, well, I don't see you as one of those guys. I don't see you as dating material.
Right.
That is, I think, to me, that helps me understand the same kind of crushing, or if I were to say to you, Jina, I don't really see you as a woman. I just see you as a buddy, Right. I see you as one of the guys, kind of thing like that. That's what we can convey. And so I try to use empathy and put myself in somebody else's shoes to understand. If somebody told me, I don't care that you're a dad, I don't care about your hobbies or the big one in work, I don't care what you do in your personal life. All I care about is who you are between 9 to 5, Monday through Friday.
As if we can turn off who we are.
Right.
By the way, Edwin said, guys know that term. So apparently, me. Thank you, Edwin. It's interesting because while you were talking, I was thinking about, you said there's so much more to me, being a Marine is just one. And when we were talking, you brought that up as an example of people using a phrase to refer to everybody. In the one case, it was a good way. In this case, maybe it's not so good. Part of what I was thinking is how any person that you talk to, so I'm talking to somebody who's from Japan, they aren't representative of the entire Pan-Asian community. If I'm talking to somebody from Guatemala, they're not representative of the Latinx community. And if you're talking to me, I'm not representative of all women. And I'm not I was smirking because you wouldn't want me to be, because I can be pretty difficult. And I'm not representative of all Black people, because none of us represents all of us. And we're all different. And then the other thing I thought about was microaggressions, because when you said, well, you're not like one of them, that's something that, Black people have heard. Well, you're not like the other Black people. You're different than. And I'm like, what does that even mean? And so when I hear I don't see color, my first response is, unless you're colorblind, I know you do. So I'm guessing that you're trying to tell me something else. But then when I say that, then there's no sort of feedback. There's no response. What do you say to that? Because the one article said it's well-intentioned. So you said you used to say that. When you said that term, you were trying to say?
I was trying to say, I judge you as more than just a color. And I think that that's what people think that they're conveying by that. The problem is, it wipes out the color part of judging you for who you are. And I don't think anybody wants that. I don't want you to see me as more than, and I'm going to keep going back to the veteran. I know it's not really perfect because I chose to become a Marine. But I want you to see me more of a veteran, but I don't want you to see me outside or absent.
Right.
That
it's a part of who you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's become a part of your identity. It means something.
You're not colorblind. And I can challenge people and say, when they say I don't see color, I'm like, okay, cool. What color are you? Are you colorless yourself?
Right.
And now I think that, part of the perspective of being the majority race is when I say I don't see color, it can mean I just assume everybody's, like I said, me, my background. They joined for the same reasons I joined. They became a CPA for the same reasons I became a CPA. They had the same upbringing, the same history, the same context that I had. And that's not the case. Even when I'm talking to other white people, when I'm talking to other Marine Corps veterans, when I'm talking to other veterans who became CPAs, we all have very different backgrounds still.
So you just said something that I just, we've had lots of conversations, and sometimes these crazy ideas pop into my head. And just now I thought, a group of white people are not all the exact same skin color.
Right.
But would you say to a group of white people, I don't see color? I can't imagine you would use this phrase if there wasn't a minority in the room, but correct me if I'm wrong.
We do say I don't see color, but it's sometimes used to talk about minorities and say, well, I'm better than you because I don't see them as that.
Got it.
So, yes, white people do say to other white people, I don't see color. But, and I think this is the shutdown part of the conversation. And this was referenced in one of your slides. When you say, I don't see color, you're really trying to say, I'm not racist, I'm not prejudiced, I'm not biased. End of conversation. We don't need to go there at all. So that's the end of it. I don't see color. So let's move on to something else. And that's why I stopped using it. I want conversations to go deeper. That's why you and I get along. That's why I joined the group that you had started. I want the conversations to continue. I don't want conversations to stop. And so when I was saying to white friends and to minority friends, and the conversation would just stop there, I'm like, well, I'm going to stop saying that because it's not resulting in what I want. I want us to continue to talk about uncomfortable sticky issues, and this is just stopping the conversation for whatever reason.
So in your experience then, using that phrase ended up turning what might have been a meaningful conversation into what either felt contentious or uncomfortable, and so you have to pivot to go a different direction because you can't work your way through what happens once that pops up, the phrase and then the reaction to the phrase.
Right.
This sounds like a good stopping point, lady, to do our second poll.
All right, and that second poll should now be on your screen. How would you describe the phrase, I don't see color? Well-intentioned, unaware, insensitive, other, prefer not to say.
Yeah, when I sent you the polling questions, I changed the order up there, Barrett, because I knew we were having this conversation. I imagined the flow of our conversation, and I was curious the perceptions. And there are quite a few comments. I kind of want to share them as soon as we come back from the poll, but I don't want them to influence the poll.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and close down this poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And now the results are on the screen. I'll read them out. Well-intentioned, 34%. Unaware, 31%. Insensitive, 15%. Other, 15%. Prefer not to answer, 6%.
Thank you. So the majority think it's either well-intentioned or they're just unaware, like falls into a blind spot for the person, and 15% say it's insensitive. And you were saying how you use the phrase sort of as a statement about, I see you as more than one color. There's somebody in the comment, I don't want to pronounce this name wrong. I won't even try. The comment is, I don't see color is equal to all lives matter. And yes, all lives matter, but it's taking away the highlight of Black Lives Matter. I've heard that one a lot. And then I don't see color. I think some people mean we are all human, regardless of the color of our skin. But that's not how it comes across. Thank you, Jamie. Because I think the way it's expressed and the way it's received are completely different. You talked about a friend of yours that helped you to understand or to see the impact of this phrase. Are you comfortable talking about that?
Yeah, I can talk about. My best friend, met him 6 years ago. He walked into a gym where I was training, and we hit it off over the next few years. He's biracial. He's Black and white. His mother is white. His father is Black. He's from Detroit. He's got a very different background and upbringing than I do. Went to Howard University, and he's a classical music teacher and aficionado. Loves classical music, plays the tuba. And just the friendship that we've developed over the past 6 years, the common bond of the iron game, what we call it, or, lifting weights together, just led to tons of time for conversations, road trips to competitions and events. This man is my brother, closer than I would say any Marine relationship I ever had also, because we, in the Marine Corps, we were all stuck to each other by dint of Uncle Sam's guidance and desires. Chris and I are best friends by choice, and it's just a tight bond. But just conversations with him have helped me see the importance of Black Lives Matter. I can run things by him. Am I thinking right on this? Am I thinking wrong? We can, he does the same to me. We talk and we just get deeper on a lot of this stuff together. And it's very valuable. I want to touch on the poll, the well-intentioned versus not quite sure.
Sure.
And take this back to the 60s with Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, because I think that's where people who are well-intentioned think that this phrase aligns with. And he said in that speech that one day my 4 children will not be judged based on the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And when I'm thinking the best of somebody who says this phrase, I think that's what they're trying to say is I'm not going to judge you based on the color of your skin, but I'm going to judge you based on the content of your character. I think in that context, that mattered because people were judged solely on the color of their skin.
Right.
And if I looked at you and saw that you were a black person, I assumed you were up to no good. And then I needed to watch you carefully, and I needed to do all of these things that white people needed to do to protect their neighborhoods from black people. That was the context that Martin Luther King said in that. Fast forward that 50 years, it would be ridiculous, I believe, to think that Martin Luther King Jr. wanted us to live in a world where color wasn't even seen or referenced or
Agreed.
had any kind of bearing or emphasis or anything.
Right.
To say, I don't judge you based on the color of your skin, I think is very different than saying, I don't see you based on the color of your skin.
I totally get that. And I think part of what makes it challenging is that when you reduce me to skin color, you put me squarely into a stereotyped box. And my skin color speaks to heritage, it speaks to culture that many people that are African American or black, depending on how you want to be referred to, that many of us share, but not all of us share. People, somebody can be black and this can be their first time living in the country. They might be from the Caribbean. They might be from a country where they're not African American at all, but they look like they are, and people assume that they are. And then you can have somebody who's actually from the continent of Africa. There's no country, Africa, but the continent. So from, I don't know, Cote d'Ivoire or Ghana or Kenya, and they come here and they are African. And so to say I don't see color almost wipes away the rich history that comes behind race. And this is true with all different races, because color is really just a less than 1% difference in our genetic makeup. It's the same thing as having different heights, different shapes of your fingernails. So there's an evolution. We actually talked about this in our group. There's an evolution to why people prescribe value or worth or intelligence, etc., to race, to skin color. So, but what we now know is skin colors really do carry ethnicity and culture because of where different groups, what's the word I'm looking for? The evolution of humans and culture, different people. We weren't commingled as groups until the modern day because of the fact that we didn't have the ability to cross the oceans, that very much insulated groups are our history. So anyway, it's a long way of saying, to say I don't see color suggests you don't see a big part of me. But you also talked about intention. If the intention is to say, I'm not judging you, I see you as more than one thing, your race. Is there another way to express that without saying I don't see color? How have you come to speak to that instead of using this phrase?
I can't say that I've found a good replacement for that phrase to convey. And I think that's why people default to that, is because it's easy. They think it aligns them with, one of the greatest civil rights leaders of all time. And this is just end of conversation kind of thing. Here's why I stopped saying it also. It's a lie. Just as you talked about, color is a big part of your genetic makeup and who you are. If you've ever tried to describe somebody to somebody else without using color, it gets very awkward. Talking on the phone to somebody and you're like, well, which one? And you don't want to say, the black guy standing over there. It gets very awkward to try and come up with all these other things. It is a descriptor of who you are. And reading books like Malcolm Gladwell, Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow, we do prejudge every situation we go into. We make a judgment about someone within the first 3 seconds of seeing them. By saying I don't see color, you're saying I don't need to work on that. I don't need to push against that fast judgment because it's not an issue for me.
That's a
By
great
admitting I do see color, it means I need to slow down, process things, and use the hard part of my brain, the slow part, the slow thinking part, to fight against that tendency, those biases that we automatically do have. Every situation we're in, we're making judgments based off of what we see, and you need to push past that.
So I was thinking, and then a couple people put into the comments, somebody said, I don't judge based on color, is a possible way to say it. I love what you just said about, I don't need to work on that, but we know our brains. The first thing we notice about a person is race or culture. It's the first thing we notice. That's what studies have shown. But we're not aware that we've noticed it.
Yeah.
You talk about the fast brain. This is the automatic brain. That's not even the fast brain part, right? And so I don't judge based on color was a great suggestion. The concern I have is the word judge, because that can be a limiting term. Maybe we can say, I see you as way more than color, or maybe that one doesn't work either. I don't know. I'm thinking.
I don't really even like that one because it's again, it tries to cheapen. I don't see you as a black woman, Jina. I just see you for you, kind of a thing. Well, it's like, why don't you see me as a black woman?
Right. Well, and if you see me for me,
is that a bad thing? Is that a good thing? Why do you act like that's a compliment that I don't see you just based on your color?
Well, to be fair, I don't think you'd walk up to me at Starbucks out of the blue and say, I don't see you as a black person, because that's not what we're talking about here. But I think when we start having conversations, especially when we get into conversations about race, everybody's talking about diversity, inclusion, equity, belonging. This is something we're hearing all over the place post George Floyd. And as a result of that, this phrase has popped up a lot more.
Yeah.
And I always took the phrase to mean the person is trying to convey that they're woke and that they're not acknowledging, you just said it a minute ago so wonderfully, that I don't need to work on that. Instead of saying out loud, maybe I need to work on that. But I think then, so if you were saying something like that to me, my responsibility on the other side of that conversation is to extend you some grace and allow you to work on that and be supportive while you work on that and not judge you for having to work on that. Because there's a whole lot of judging going on. I'm worried you're judging me when you say that, and maybe I'm judging you right back for having said it.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally does. I think you did say it. You said, I see you as more than your color. I would just stop it and say, I see you. If I want to convey the conversation should go deeper and continue here, is just say to somebody when you're having that conversation, instead of saying, I don't see race, I don't see color, I don't judge you based on color. I see you, and I want to understand your history, and I want to understand what your thoughts are on this. Not so that I can argue with them, not even necessarily so that I can change my mind, but I do want to understand, and I want to make up my own mind, and I need more input, because you are not, like you said at the beginning, you are not representative of of all women, all races, all CPAs.
Right.
So we need more conversations like this.
I am loving the so there are a whole bunch of suggestions in the Q&A. Somebody said, I see you for all that you are. Somebody said, I don't see you based on your color. Somebody said, I choose to respect you for all you are. Somebody said, so there's so many coming in. I obviously can't read them all, but there's one I wanted to find. It was Francine, I think. Oh, I think I already read hers. Somebody said, I don't make assumptions based on color. And I think what's important to say here is that this isn't even a question of making assumptions. when we notice race, we've noticed it before we're aware that we've noticed something. And so to say you're making assumptions based on race is when you become aware that of the person's race. Let's pretend, let's expand time and say it takes 10 seconds to become aware of something. We know it's way faster than that, but let's just pretend. Then you've noticed somebody's race in the first half of the first second. But you're not aware that you've done that until 10 seconds in. And so it's the 10-second mark in my example where now you might be making those assumptions. But what we know about bias is that you're already acting on your experiences and assumptions around race before you've even processed the fact that you've seen race. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think when you get into these discussions about blink or thinking fast and slow and the fast brain and assumptions and bias and all that kind of stuff, you start to think, man, if I could just shut off the fast thinking part of my brain, without realizing that is also an important part of the brain. We carve neural pathways, we shortcut a lot of things in order to survive.
Right.
What was it? I read one of the articles that says, I don't see color. And I was like, okay, what do you do when you come to a stoplight? When you see a red light, you need to shortcut that and immediately stop, so that you don't run out into traffic and die. And so we don't want to just shut down the fast thinking part, but the fast thinking part can be changed with deliberate intention. Applying the slow thinking part in the times when it's not needed to stay alive, to adjust that and to expand beyond just the way that I was born or the way I was brought up, and that's the way I'm going to be for the next 60 years of my life.
I think what you said is so spot on, because a lot of people say I don't make assumptions based on color.
You do,
but we do, and where it starts to show up is in what we call microaggressions, where people say or behave in ways that they send out the signals of what your biases are and or where you might be making assumptions. And let's be clear that you are prejudging somebody. The word prejudice is a very negative term now. Racist is a very negative term, but it's not an on-off switch, right? It's not like either you're racist or you're not. There are degrees. And what we're talking about here is when you are acting on something that is automatic. The classic stories you hear, it's a black man walks into an elevator and the white woman steps a little bit to the left and clutches her purse before she's even realized she's done it. A black woman might do that when a black man walks into the elevator. That's an example of a behavior that we might not be aware of, but it's autopilot. And we're conveying those beliefs before we realize it. Anyway, I'm trying to be mindful of time. And so I do want to go to the next polling question. I'm not sure what that is, but maybe we should do that.
Okay, we're going to find out in a second. The next polling question is, are you familiar with the term inclusive language? Yes, no, prefer not to answer.
We're hearing more about that. Wow, the comments are flooding in. I can't possibly keep up with it. Somebody said, Barrett, that is an excellent sentiment. It is the difference between acknowledging that you may have a subconscious bias based on anything, and color is one. Now, if only I saw when that came in so I knew what Cassie was referring to. Great way to state that, Barrett. Those all came in at the same time.
I'm going to go ahead and close this poll. Everyone is super into this and getting their questions in, or the answers in quickly. So I'm going to close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And those results are now on your screen. Yes, 57%. No, 38%. Prefer not to answer, 5%. Back to you guys.
Thank you. Thank you. So for the 38% who say no, I think this is where we're having the conversation about what is the language we can use that draw people in and that don't put up the barriers. simple examples, and not necessarily in the conversation we're having, but just to make a simple example. We went from saying maternal leave, then adding paternal leave, and now we're just calling it parental leave. Because parental leave leaves it open for anybody who's a parent. You could have adopted a child. You could have had a child. You could be the mother, you could be the father, you could be both parents in the same sex marriage or relationship. Either way, you're parenting a child, and we have leave to accommodate you. And so to use, that's language that's a little bit more inclusive as opposed to some, what's the term? I'm trying to think of the term. I think I've lost all of my vocabulary today. I should flag these. I know there's a way to flag these, but I forget to do them.
Are you looking for the term maternity leave?
No, there was somebody that made a comment, and Catherine, but I extend grace. However, explain why it could be seen as offensive. And I think what Catherine is saying there is what we said earlier, Barrett, we're not having these conversations out of the blue. Mm-hmm. So how do I turn it around then? So you say to me, we're having a conversation, and you say, well, I don't see color. And I'm like, oh my God, that was so offensive. Of course you see color. And now I'm starting to get defensive or reactive. How can somebody come back from that? I'll own my side of it, but first I'm curious from your side of it.
The thing I always do whenever I get into these, whenever that fight or flight thing kicks in, is I have to stop and ask myself, is this the time, the place, and the person to have this conversation, first of all?
That's fair.
And if it isn't, then I will just leave it that and move on. If I were to say that to somebody and I want the conversation to continue, I probably would want them to ask me, what do you mean by that when you say that? I want to understand. I believe that you have good intention with saying this, and I want to understand what it is that you're trying to say here. So could you help? Could you add another sentence or two to that by what you mean?
Okay, but so I'm going to say, stay on your side of the fence. Now you're telling me. I'm asking you. I haven't been that gracious person that you're talking about. So if I'm the person you're talking to and I'm starting to get a little sticky, but you think we can continue the conversation, is there something you can share for those people listening who can think, so how do you stay present in that engagement and keep the conversation moving forward, even though it seems like I'm shutting down on you?
Okay, I got you. So I am the person who just said to you, sorry, I was trying to put myself on the other side, and
got it.
Somebody said that to me. So I've just said to you, I don't see color, and I see that it's stopping the conversation. And well, if I'm aware of body language and things like that, which is very hard to be, and does take practice, I could say something like, Jina, I felt like that came across the wrong way, or maybe you didn't receive that the way that I intended that. I want you to understand what I mean by that and what I'm trying to convey to you by that, so that we can keep going in this conversation.
That's great. And the flip of that is, so I have to own my side. If somebody says that to me, you already answered it for me, by the way, so I'm totally cheating and I'm stealing what you said. If somebody says that to me, and I do this, I say, I don't know that that's what you were trying to express, and I really want to understand a little bit more what you mean by that. Mm-hmm. And then I usually go on to say, because when I hear somebody say, I don't see color, I find it difficult because I know that that's not true in the literal sense. Mm. So I'm sure you're meaning something else behind that. Help me understand what that is. Now, what we both have just talked about is why uncomfortable conversations are uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Is often, at least from my side, I'll just admit, I've said something, I can see that it's either made the other person uncomfortable, it might have even offended them, and now I am so mortified that I just want to get the hell out of the conversation. Mm. and I want to shut it down and I want to end because I'm trying to protect myself. And I don't want that person to hate me, be mad at me, or think I'm not respecting them. And especially if it's a high stakes relationship. And so I worry that just staying present in the conversation the way you described or the way I described is asking a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming you've had to do this. What does it feel like when you have to do that?
When you have to fight against the fight or flight tendency and push in deeper.
You've had to learn. Well, I know you. You've done practice. You've done the work to be able to, you said, notice that you're doing it. And then stay present and keep going.
And like I said, that can't happen in the moment necessarily. You have to push against that when you're not confronted with those kind of situations.
Mm-hmm.
And in a little bit, you have to choose to put yourself into those situations so that you can get comfortable being uncomfortable, you know, how that goes.
Right.
For me, the reason I'm where I am now in this is because I don't get an out. So I am a Christian. It is my job to love people and to see people and to meet them where they're at. And I will say in the church, we do a bad job of this because we go immediately to a verse that says, in Christ, there is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male or female. And so that's the all lives matter, you know, we're all one in Christ kind of thing. But that's not, you keep reading Paul in the New Testament, and that's not what he says anywhere else. And I mean, that's not the way he treats himself. He defends himself being a Roman citizen in the book of Acts. He talks about the differences between Jews and Greeks. In the book of Revelation, we're seeing that there's a great multitude worshiping Jesus from every tribe, people, tongue, and language. So we're not just one melting pot. We are diverse, and we need to not try and make everyone look like me.
Right. Can you imagine how boring the world would be if everybody everybody looked the same and thought the same and felt the same? It just wouldn't be a very fun place.
I agree. I think our diversity is our strengths.
Right.
And when we shy away from that, we lose a lot. It's like watching black and white TV versus watching high definition 4K.
Right.
You have to push into the uncomfortable to get to that point.
You said earlier that you can't do it in the moment. You have to sort of be prepared for it or push yourself through it. And I wrote down a note because it reminded me of something my husband says often. When we're trying to do this kind of work and we're sitting in a room and we're hearing people talk about it and it sounds interesting and I think I understand it. It's like trying to learn piano by PowerPoint. Because you can completely understand how to play piano by watching a couple of YouTube videos. But then as soon as you put your fingers on a keyboard, you realize, oh, wait, there's muscle memory involved. You know, there's hand-eye coordination. And it's hard. It's hard. And you just said something very powerful that you said diversity is our strength. Diversity is our strength when everybody's allowed to show up and bring their differences into the room. Mm-hmm. Too often people show up in the room and we are covering up the things that make us different so we look like everyone else. That is not a strength because I am putting in a lot of energy to hiding parts of me from you. Mm-hmm. I can't hide my race, but I could hide an accent. Mm-hmm. I could withhold my religion if it's different than yours. I could withhold my socioeconomic background if I think you're going to judge me for it. Mm-hmm. There's all kinds of stuff I can withhold. I can have crazy ideas and I'll never tell you one of them, but that's one of those ideas might have been the spark that starts a conversation in the direction that the organization's trying to go or this meeting is trying to go. But I'm not telling you that because I'm too busy trying to blend in. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking at the time. I want to make sure we're gonna wait till the end for that last polling question. In the meantime, there's no way we're getting all these questions. So let me just scroll through them. I think a lot of them are more comments, and I'm loving the feedback. Stop thinking of your feelings and acknowledge the other person's feelings. Thank you, Floor. That's really what you were talking about a little bit ago, is that the whole point of empathy is to put yourself in the other person's shoes, sort of stay present.
I've really thought it over the past year with everything that's been going on with, just in the news and everything like that, cops versus Black people, all this stuff going on. I've started to think of it as give people of a different background the benefit of a doubt that you extend to your own background. And I think that is it for me, is I'm going to give you the benefit of a doubt. Like I said, when you have that conversation, it gets uncomfortable. I assume that you are coming from a well-intentioned place. That's giving someone that benefit of a doubt so that the conversation can continue. I think where prejudice and where I see color goes the bad direction is that's all I'm going to assume about you. And I'm not going to give any benefit of a doubt unless you're in my group. And so that's kind of where I've been for the past year, is extending the benefit of a doubt to people beyond places that I'm comfortable in.
It's one of the things that I learned when we were having our group calls. One of the things that I think you expressed very well is how, as a white man, you have had to do the work to understand how thinking from your background and your experiences might have been barriers to understanding some of these differences, and that you've done the work now to start to see those differences. And I think that what you're talking about here, especially for the folks that are listening, I've heard you talk about a couple of things. One, self-awareness. You have to really work on self-awareness so that you can see the impact you're having on somebody. You said before, the words they're using and their body language. Those are, at least, I think you talked about this too. I think you might have mentioned a third. But noticing that is happening so that you can now step in and use some more words. That's why I wanted you to give an example of how do you keep going. So that you can recognize that you might have said something that started to create a bit of a gap, and how do you close that gap to stay in the conversation. And you also said you have to be prepared for that moment so that you yourself don't get triggered by the moment. So you're talking about self-awareness and then doing the work to understand some of the barriers so that when they come up, you can start to work through them. That's a lot of work. It's hard to do without having an intention to do it. And so is there a reason, what's motivating you to do this level of work?
Like I said, higher calling, spiritual calling to it, responsibility. That was a big one for me. In Maryland, we have the MACPA Women to Watch breakfast. And I remember 4 or 5 years ago, I was at that, and there was a white man giving one of the speeches during this thing, and he said, I can be in the room and people will listen to me, and it is my responsibility to use that position to give other people the voice, to speak up for the women in our profession who are working just as hard or harder than the men, but not being recognized for it.
Kudos to that guy, by the way.
Right, and you've talked about that before. Why you enjoy having conversations with me is because I'm in a different room than you're in, and I can give you a little bit of insight for that. But I do think it is responsibility. I'm a partner in a firm that's multiracial. I don't want to just take the easy way out and default to hiring everybody that looks like me. For one, I don't want to work in a firm with only guys, but I need to work hard to make sure that our firm continues to grow, has that diversity, that multiple perspectives from, all ages, all backgrounds, everything that we've got. and not, I don't want to be that boss that somebody's talking bad about 30 years from now about how they succeeded in spite of starting off working for Barrett Young. I'm like, that would be terrible. I don't want that.
Don't want that to be your legacy. Well, I'm looking at the time. We are at the end of time. I don't know why I even have this slide in here because we do questions the whole time. So, lady, do you want to do a last poll, and then I'll throw it back to you, Barrett, if you want to share a last comment or thought?
Okay, I'll go ahead and launch that poll. It should be on your screen now. It says, are you familiar with the term microaggression? Yes, no, not sure, prefer not to answer. This is the last poll of today's session. We had 4 polls today, and to get full credit, you must have answered 3 of those polls.
So somebody said time for the last question. Oh, they were talking about the polling question. Do you have any final thoughts about that? Well, no, the poll's going to close here in like 10 seconds, so we'll wait.
Yep, I was going to go ahead and close that down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I'll go ahead and share those results. Yes, 53%, no, 28%, not sure, 15%, prefer not to answer, 4%. Back to you guys.
Thank you. So we probably have a minute left. Final thoughts about this whole conversation?
I can't convey enough or appropriately how rewarding it is to push into this stuff. And I think that's the problem, is when it all looks like work. Yes, it's work in the sense that your brain is going to have to change and shape new pathways and things like that. But the reward, I find, is greater than the work. And not just reward as being recognized as somebody who's woke or progressive or gets it or whatever, but the reward of pushing into conversations with people and getting in depth with people, and not just how was your day, how's the weather, how are the kids kind of thing, but getting into like, why are you in this profession? What do you want to do to inspire other people to be in this profession? Getting past that kind of stuff. How can I work with you to attract more of your peers into this profession? I mean, those are the kind of conversations that we get the reward from, and it makes the work so much. It's not work like being out in the heat of the desert, 5 days a week kind of thing.
It's not work like doing a tax return. It's meaningful, and you get as much out of it as anything, I think is what you're saying. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. But it's hard to convey that until you do it and you dig in and you get into it. And I like the space that you create, Jina, because we can ask questions without me fearing that you're going to go and blast me and say, I had this conversation with this racist white guy who didn't understand what I was saying, kind of thing. So finding those people that you can have those conversations with, where there's trust, where there's mutual admiration, and you can just dig into these things. Like I said, right person, place, time for the conversation. So,
well, thank you. I love these conversations. And 2 weeks from now, Dr. Mays, he's the department chair and accounting associate professor of accounting at Howard University. He wrote a children's book called When I Grow Up, I Want to Be an Accountant. And I had a whole conversation with him about why. And it turns out that maybe children's books teach the parents too. So anyway, join me. I hope some of the folks out there can join me. And I'm looking forward to continuing this series. Thank you, Barrett, for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Lady, back to you.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get ready to wrap up with today's webinar. We here at CPA Academy will process credit later today. That'll be available in your CPA Academy accounts within 24 hours. Everyone will have an opportunity for a full webinar evaluation. Those links to the evaluation are available in your CPA Academy accounts as well as your email. Thanks again to our wonderful presenters, Jina and Barrett, for a great presentation, and as I would like to call it, a crucial conversation. We are always appreciative of your time and insights, and warm thanks to all of you in the audience for your participation today. We urge you to take a look at your CPA Academy My Account page and see all of the resources that we have made available to you there, and to take a look at the other fantastic webinars we are able to offer. We hope to see you all on future webinars and hope that you guys have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.